Top 10 poorest countries in the world. The poorest countries in the world might not be as obvious as you may have assumed. However, if you figured out that every country that is listed as one of the poorest countries in the world is also a third world country or a nation with a public debt problem, then you are not far from the truth. While there are instances in which the two overlap, it is not fair to automatically assume that all of the poorest countries in the world are also underdeveloped. This is mostly due to the negative connotations associated with countries classified as third world nations. Using past GDP and economic growth rates, we can rank countries by wealth, determining which the poorest countries in the world are. GDP per capita is an indicator used to measure the economic performance of countries relative to their population. It is calculated by dividing the gross domestic product or GDP of a certain country by the number of residents. It gives us some insight into the living standards in that particular country. Economic growth rate, on the other hand, measures the changes in the GDP. Another useful indicator is the unemployment rate, which indicates the percentage of the labor force that is currently out of a job. The labor force only includes people who are of legal working age and are able to work. If you are new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Watch on and get to know which 10 countries are the poorest in the world according to the news outlet USA Today. Number 10. Myanmar, GDP per capita, $1,533. Myanmar, officially the Republic of the Union of Myanmar, is a country in Southeast Asia. Myanmar is bordered by Bangladesh and India to its northwest, China to its northeast, Laos and Thailand to its east and southeast, and the Andaman Sea and the Bay of Bengal to its south and southwest respectively. Myanmar is the largest country in mainland Southeast Asia and the 10th largest in Asia by area. As of 2017, the population was about 54 million. Its capital city is Naypyidaw and its largest city is Yangon. For most of its independent years, the country has been engrossed in rampant ethnic strife, and its myriad ethnic groups have been involved in one of the world's longest-running ongoing civil wars. During this time, the United Nations and several other organizations have reported consistent and systematic human rights violations in the country. It is a country rich in jade and gems, oil, natural gas, and mineral resources. Myanmar is also endowed with renewable energy. It has the highest solar power potential compared to other countries of the Great Mekong sub-region. Despite its growing economy, the percentage of people living below the poverty line is 32.1%. The agricultural sector contributes to nearly half of the national GDP, and approximately two-thirds of the population work in this sector. Number 9. Uzbekistan, GDP per capita, $1,350. Uzbekistan, officially the Republic of Uzbekistan, is a country in Central Asia. As a sovereign state, Uzbekistan is a secular, unitary constitutional republic. It comprises 12 provinces, known as vilayats, and one autonomous republic, Karakalpakstan. The capital and largest city of Uzbekistan is Tashkent. The Uzbek economy is in gradual transition to the market economy, with foreign trade policy being based on import substitution. In September 2017, the country's currency became fully convertible at market rates. Uzbekistan is a major producer and exporter of cotton, with the gigantic power generation facilities of the Soviet era and an ample supply of natural gas. Uzbekistan has become the largest electricity producer in Central Asia. As of late 2018, the republic was given a BB rating by both Standard & Poor and Fitch. Strength indicated by Brookings Institution and Uzbekistan have large liquid assets, high economic growth, and low public debt. Amongst the constraints holding the republic back are low GDP per capita, something the government could influence by changing how it accounts for sectors of the economy not currently included. Uzbekistan has GNI per capita of $2,020 in current dollars in 2018, giving a PPP equivalent of $7,230. Uzbekistan has a population of around 32 million people, with 14.1% of them living below the national poverty line. Number 8. Kyrgyzstan, GDP per capita, $1,266. Kyrgyzstan, officially the Kyrgyz Republic, also known as the Kyrgyzstan, is a landlocked country in Central Asia. It is bordered by Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and China. Its capital and largest city is Bishkek. Kyrgyzstan's history spanned a variety of cultures and empires, although geographically isolated by its highly mountainous terrains. Kyrgyzstan has been one of the crossroads of several great civilizations as part of the Silk Road and other commercial routes. It is inhabited by a succession of tribes and clans. Kyrgyzstan has periodically fallen under the larger domination. Since independence, Kyrgyzstan has officially been a unitary parliamentary republic, although it continues to endure ethnic conflicts, revolt, economic troubles, transitional government, and political conflicts. Despite the backing of major Western lenders, including the International Monetary Fund (IMF), the World Bank, and the Asian Development Bank, Kyrgyzstan has economic difficulties following independence. Initially, they were a result of the breakup of the Soviet trade bloc and resulting loss of markets, which impeded the republic's transition to a demand economy. Kyrgyzstan was the ninth poorest country in the former Soviet Union and is today the second poorest country in Central Asia after Tajikistan. 22.4% of the country's population live below the poverty line. However, Kyrgyzstan is rich in mineral resources but has negligible petroleum and natural gas reserves. It imports petroleum and gas. Amongst its mineral reserves are substantial deposits of coal, gold, uranium, antimony, and other valuable metals. Cotton and tobacco are some of the most exported products. Number 7. Tanzania. GDP per capita $1,159. Tanzania is a country in East Africa within the African Great Lakes region. The United Nations estimated Tanzania's 2018 population at 56.31 million, which is slightly smaller than South Africa, making it the second most populous country located entirely south of the equator. Tanzania has made some of progress towards reducing extreme hunger and malnutrition. The Global Hunger Index ranked the situation as alarming with a score of 42 in the year 2000. Since then, the GHI has declined to 29.5. Children in rural areas suffer substantially higher rates of malnutrition and chronic hunger, although urban-rural disparities have narrowed as regards both stunting and underweight. Low rural sector productivity arises mainly from inadequate infrastructure investments, limited access to farm inputs, extension services and credits, limited technology as well as trade marketing support, and heavy dependence on rain-fed agriculture and natural resources. Approximately 68% of Tanzania's 44.9 million citizens live below the poverty line of 1.25% a day. 32% of the population is malnourished. The most prominent challenges Tanzania faces in poverty reduction are unsustainable harvesting of its natural resources, unchecked cultivation, climate change, and water sources encroachment, according to the United Nations Development Programme (UNDP). There are very few resources for Tanzanians in terms of credit services, infrastructure, or availability to improved agricultural technologies, which further exacerbates hunger and poverty in the country, according to the UNDP. The 2019 World Bank report showed that in the last 10 years, poverty has reduced by 8%, from 34.4% in 2007 to 26.4% in 2018. Number 6. Ethiopia. GDP per capita $1,122. The Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia is a landlocked country in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia has a total area of 1,100,000 square kilometers and over 109 million inhabitants, and is the 13th most populous country in the world and the second most populous in Africa. In the 1970s and 1980s, Ethiopia experienced civil conflicts and communist purges, which hindered its economy drastically. The country has since recovered and as of 2010 has the largest economy by GDP in East Africa, but remains one of the world's poorest countries, facing poverty, hunger, corruption, weak infrastructure, poor respect for human rights, and limited access to health and education, with a literacy rate of only 49%, ranking in the worst quartile of the Human Development Index. Ethiopia has a population of around 109 million people, 23.5% of whom live below the national poverty line. That's nearly 25 million people or more, or to put it into perspective, the entire population of Australia. Agriculture makes up for nearly half of this country's GDP. This African state mainly exports coffee, oilseeds, and vegetables. Its biggest market for coffee exports is the US. Number 5. Haiti. GDP per capita $922. The Republic of Haiti is a country located on the island Hispaniola in the Greater Antilles archipelago of the Caribbean Sea, to the east of Cuba and Jamaica and south of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands. It has an estimated population of 11.4 million, making it the most populous country in the Caribbean. Haiti has a predominantly free market economy with a GDP of $19.97 billion and per capita GDP of $922. The country uses the Haitian gourde as its currency. Despite its tourism industry, Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the Americas, with poverty, corruption, political instability, and poor infrastructure, lack of health care, and lack of education cited as the main causes. Unemployment is also high, and many Haitians seek to immigrate. Trade declined dramatically after the 2010 earthquake and subsequent outbreak of cholera, with the country's purchasing power parity of GDP falling by 8%, from $12.5 billion to $11.18 billion. Haiti ranked 145 of 182 countries in the 2010 United Nations Human Development Index, with 57.3% of the population being deprived in at least 3 of the HDI's poverty measures. More than 90% of the government's budget comes from an agreement with Petrocarbon, a Venezuelan-led oil alliance. The United Nations states that in total, $13.34 billion has been earmarked for post-earthquake reconstruction through 2020. Though 2 years after the 2010 quake, less than half of that amount had actually been released, according to the UN documents. As of 2015, the US government has allocated $4 billion $3 billion which has already been spent, and the rest is dedicated to longer-term projects. Haiti has a population of around 11 million people, and 58.5% of them live below the poverty line. The unemployment rate is quite high at 13.5%. Haiti's top exports are apparel, cocoa, coffee, mangoes, and sugar. Number 4. Tajikistan. GDP per capita $861. The Republic of Tajikistan is a landlocked country in Central Asia with an area of 143,100 square kilometers and an estimated population of 9,537,645 people. It is a developing country with a transition economy that is highly dependent on remittances, aluminium and cotton production. Nearly 47% of Tajikistan's GDP comes from immigrant remittances, mostly from Tajiks working in Russia. The current economic situation remains fragile, largely owing to corruption, uneven economic reforms, and economic mismanagement. With foreign revenue precariously dependent upon remittances from migrant workers overseas and exports to aluminium and cotton, the economy is highly vulnerable to external shocks. According to some estimates, about 20% of the population live on less than $1.25 per day. Migration from Tajikistan and the consequent remittances have been unprecedented in their magnitude and economic impact. Tajikistan belongs to the group of countries with a high debt trap risk associated with Chinese investment within the Belt and Road Initiative (BRI), meaning that excessive reliance on Chinese loans may weaken the country's ability to manage its external debt in a sustainable way. Tajikistan has a population of around 9 million, and 31.3% of them live below the national poverty line. The unemployment rate is 10.9%. Number 3. Uganda. GDP per capita $759. Uganda is a landlocked country in East Central Africa. The official languages are English and Swahili, although any other language may be used as a medium of instruction in schools or other educational institutions or for legislative, administrative, or judicial purposes, as may be prescribed by law. In 2015, Uganda's economy generated export income from the following merchandise: coffee, oil, re-exports, base metals and products, fish, maize, cement, tobacco, tea, sugar, hides and skins, cocoa beans, sim, flowers and other products. The country has largely untapped reserves of both crude oil and natural gas. Uganda is one of the poorest nations in the world. In 2012, 37.8% of the population lived on less than $1.25 a day. Despite making enormous progress in reducing the countrywide poverty incidence from 56% of the population in 1992 to 24.5% in 2009, poverty remains deep-rooted in the country's rural areas, which are home to 84% of Ugandans. People in rural areas of Uganda depend on farming as a main source of income, and 90% of all rural women work in the agricultural sector. In addition to agricultural work, rural women are responsible for the caretaking of their families. The average Ugandan woman spends 9 hours a day on domestic tasks, such as preparing food and clothing, fetching water and firewood, and caring for the elderly, the sick as well as orphans. As such, women on average work longer hours than men, between 12 to 18 hours per day, with a mean of 15 hours as compared to men, who work between 8 to 10 hours a day. To supplement their income, rural women may engage in small-scale entrepreneurial activities, such as rearing and selling local breeds of animals. Nonetheless, because of their heavy workload, they have little time for these income-generating activities. The poor cannot support their children at school, and in most cases, girls drop out of school to help out in domestic work or to get married. As a result, young women tend to have older and more sexually experienced partners, and this puts women at a disproportionate risk of getting affected by HIV, accounting for about 5.7% of all adults living with HIV in Uganda. Number 2. Mozambique. GDP per capita $501. The sovereign state is separated from the Comoros, Mayotte, and Madagascar by the Mozambique Channel to the east. The capital and largest city of Mozambique is Maputo. Mozambique is endowed with rich and extensive natural resources. The country's economy is based largely on agriculture, but industry is growing, mainly food and beverages, chemical manufacturing, and aluminium and petroleum production. The tourism sector is also expanding. South Africa is Mozambique's main trading partner and source of foreign direct investments, while Belgium, Brazil, and Portugal and Spain are also amongst the country's most important economic partners. Since 2001, Mozambique's annual average GDP growth has been amongst the world's highest amongst the country, which is still one of the poorest and most underdeveloped countries in the world, ranking low in GDP per capita, human development, measures of inequality, and average life expectancy. Mozambique is the second poorest country in Africa as well as in the world. Out of a population of around 30 million, 46.1% live below the national poverty line. The unemployment rate has been calculated to be 3.2% in 2018. The country relies heavily on agriculture and mining. About 80% of the labor force is employed in the agriculture industry. Number 1. DR Congo, GDP per capita $475. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, also known as Congo Kinshasa, DR Congo, the DROC, or simply Congo, and historically Zaire, is a country in Central Africa. It is by area the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa, the second largest in all of Africa, and the 11th largest in the world. With a population of around 105 million, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is the most populous officially francophone country in the world, as well as the 4th most populous country in Africa and the 15th most populous country in the world. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is widely considered one of the world's richest countries in natural resources. Its untapped deposits of raw materials and minerals are estimated to be worth in excess $24 trillion. The Congo has 70% of the world's coltan, a third of its cobalt, more than 30% of its diamond reserves, and a tenth of its copper. Despite such vast mineral wealth, the economy of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has declined drastically since the mid-1980s. The African country generated up to 70% of its export revenue from minerals in the 1970s and 1980s, and was particularly hit when resource prices deteriorated at that time. The Congolese citizens are amongst the poorest people on earth. DR Congo consistently has the lowest or nearly the lowest nominal GDP per capita in the world. The DRC is also one of the 20 lowest ranked countries on the Corruption Perception Index. According to data from the World Bank, the unemployment rate is relatively low at 4.2%. However, a massive 63.9% of people live below the national poverty line. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy this video, do well to hit the like button, leave a comment in the comment section below, and click on the notification button so you don't miss out on any of our subsequent videos.